Go ahead and tell me your name and what you did with Aero.
Okay, my name is Paula Morgan, and I was a marketing secretary for Jim Palmer at Aero Development. I started working there in 1975, and Dana had just left a year or so prior to that. So I knew Ed Morgan well because he would come into the office and with his ride designs and distribute apples to everybody because they had just bought a place in Scotts Valley. And so anyway, so I worked with, at that time, Bill Campbell was president and Dan Mooney was the accountant, but the Rio Grande Railroad would come and check on what was going on very often at Aero, and they had sold to Six Flags the Flying Turns ride, and that was up in the yard, and I know there was a lot of you know, everybody wanting it to work, and it being a whole new generation of the Flying Turns. It was pretty exciting. So one day they decided that it was time to test ride the Flying Turns, and they thought that the girls in the marketing department would be the perfect people. So being very anxious to do something like that, ride one of the prototype rides, it was, we were all excited about that. So they got us in the trains, and I remember Janie Carius was the one that was with me, and off we went, and went around successfully part of the way, but in an area where they couldn't see us, all of a sudden we just crashed. And there were parts flying everywhere. Well, of course, we're quite a ways above the ground. I forget just how high, but it was pretty high. I remember that. And Jan and I were just speechless. We couldn't say anything because we were pretty scared at what had just happened. And of course, everybody down below had no idea, you know, that we were okay, but we didn't say anything, you know, so they thought we had, you know, we were pretty, they didn't know. So I can just remember then coming up, Mark Sumner coming and just climbing up the Flying Turns, you know, any way he could. I'm not sure how we got up there, but I just remember seeing Mark's face the very first thing and saying, "They're okay," and he was just jubilant and shouting down to everybody that we were alive. And so they proceeded to get a big cherry picker with a big basket on it. I remember that was probably one of the scariest things, because then we had to then go from the Flying Turns track into this cherry picker, which was swinging, you know, and so I looked down and I had these high-heeled boots on. I remember that, and I had to take those off. I had to unzip them. I threw them down and somehow was able to get from the track to the swinging basket, and then they lowered us down on that. But yeah, it was a very memorable time in the marketing department at Aero Development.
So we've talked to a lot of people working in engineering. What was it like working in a marketing department for a roller coaster and an amusement park company like Aero? Just like, what was your daily life like there? Well, at first it was in the parts department with Jim Palmer, but then I was the secretary for Jim Sheldon. He was the marketing director, and then Larry Newman. And so it was exciting. I mean, we were just in our little cubicle, and then Norm Scott, of course, was in his cubicle next to me, and then there was several others that, but Norm is the one that I remember. He had lots of jokes for everybody. He was kept us entertained. So it was just really keeping track of the salesmen and what they were doing, and making sure that they, you know, went to the right people at the amusement parks, you know, the contacts and everything, and keeping track of them particularly, and posing for some of the brochures because we were cheap labor at that time. So it was exciting, you know, and I was there. I worked for Aero and then Aero Hoos until Dana and I decided we would start our own company in 1981, I believe it was. Well, yeah, it actually started in '83. We left in '81,
and worked out of our bedroom at the time, and that's where Dana designed the coaches for the Giant Dipper. And we actually were able to then get a building in '83. But yeah, working for Aero was exciting, and working with Carl was still there quite a bit. Ed wasn't working there, but Carl was in the engineering department with Ron Toomer, and also with Don Newfarmer, yes. And so, yeah, we were in the engineering department quite a bit, just looking at what they were working on. I remember Jan, my best friend there, going and trying to find the original contracts that Walt Disney might have, signed for the original rides. We looked and looked and looked, and finally we were told, well, there are no contracts. It was just handshakes, that they didn't have anything that was very formal. So I thought that was very interesting, that there was that kind of integrity, in those days. So no, it was quite a great place to be.